We're at the Canadian Beef Industry Conference in Calgary, joined by Kathy Larson, research economist with the Western Beef Development Centre, and Kathy talking about the cost of raising replacement heifers, the importance, really emphasizing the importance for cow-calf producers to consider the opportunity costs, not just the obvious costs of raising these animals.
Right. So oftentimes I think a producer, when they're penciling out what it's costing them to raise replacements, they think of the actual cash outlay they're making, not necessarily opportunity costs, which are essentially non-cash costs. And the biggest one being just the money you gave up by choosing to keep her when she was a wean calf rather than sell her. And that can be as much as 70% in those high price years of 2014-15 when we had high calf prices. But on average, it's about 60% of the value of developing a replacement heifer.
So is that an eye-opening number then for most producers you talk to?
Well, I think sometimes it's just simply overlooked, and when you see it up on a chart, for example, in the 2014 born heifers that you were keeping right off the bat, that's close to $1,500, $1,450 or so. That is her starting value right off the bat. You've done nothing to develop her, and that's an alarming number. But it's probably something they're all aware of. They just didn't necessarily think they had to include it when figuring out their costs.
Okay. Yeah, I guess, and this is, of course, important in making that decision whether or not to keep them as a replacement heifer.
Yeah, in those years that we went through, 2014-15 with the high calf prices, everybody wished they had another 50, 100 cows. And so sometimes the reaction is, I'm going to expand. I'm going to keep back more heifers, and it's probably some of the worst time to do it is when prices are high, because those high prices for the calves also gets built into the prices of your bred heifers. And so, as I showed in my presentation, it's going to take as many as probably 8 calves to try and recoup the cost of developing heifers during high price times. You'd be better off the heifers that you developed just prior to the run-up of the prices in 2014-15. So the ones that were born in 2011, 2012, you had them paid off within 3-4 calves.
Okay. So there's maybe some confusing market signals then for producers when they are considering that expansion question?
Well, I'm not sure if it's confusing market signals. It's just sometimes letting emotions get the best of you, where there's always been that you buy low, sell high, right? And sometimes it's just when that moment comes, and we know that that's just usually what happens as prices rise. People want to expand. It's just. But ideally, you should have been doing it a couple of years before the price run up.
So when we look over the longer term, you mentioned the need to have 7-8 calves per heifer from those expensive years or those high-priced years. Over the longer term, how many calves should a producer typically be aiming for, or where is that threshold?
Ultimately, actually, it depends. It depends on a lot of factors, but if I just do a basic scenario with some assumptions on what your cost of production is and what calf prices could be in the future going forward, it's probably between 5 and 6 calves. But it really depends on your own cost of production and what you can reasonably sell your calves for. So, yeah, probably at least 5 to 6 calves.
But you have accounted for many variables along, or can you expand maybe on how you came up with those numbers, the model that went into it?
Sure. So when I did the math, I just looked into the factors to develop heifers from the point that they're a wean calf to confirm bred the following fall. And then I used a starting cost of production based on Alberta's cost of production survey and what posted calf prices were for 550-pound calves. And I just modeled it out. And so, there reaches a point, though, I don't know what calf prices are going to be into the future. So I was using just an average value of $1.95 per pound. So that's sort of some of the assumptions I had to make, and assuming, cost of production is going to increase 2.5% a year. There is assumptions when you're trying to extrapolate, look into the future, what you have to do. So that's some of the math that I went through.
There's also the breeding costs, the bull, and all those other factors.
Right. So when you're looking at the cost to develop a bred heifer, you're going from, the wean calf revenue that you gave up, the winter feeding, which is about $330. When you're looking at about 200 days of feeding, and then you're going to throw out to grass for probably 150 days at, I said 70 cents per head per day. So that's another $105. And then you have to expose her to breeding, and I have that valued at about $80 per female. So when it's all added up, a 2016 born heifer is going to cost probably just under $1,400 to develop. So those would be the heifers that you're breeding this year, and they won't give you a calf till 2018.
Okay. And that's why you need X number of calves to come from that heifer.
Right, yeah. And so when I look at all the cost, she's not going to give me a calf till 2018. I don't know what calf price is going to be next year going forward, but in my estimates, it's probably going to be in the range of 6 calves or more to recoup those costs of $1,400.
Okay. So overall, in the big picture, then over the last however many years, there's been lots of discussion about the expansion or lack of expansion in the Canadian cow herd. Does this sort of study provide some signals to the industry or help inform that discussion?
Yeah, so there's probably lots of answers to why we haven't seen the expansion occur that we anticipated when we saw that run up of the prices. We have an aging producer population. I heard earlier discussion about just land use competition from grain farmers and alternate uses for land. It's just, there's also a lack of young producers coming into the industry. So part of it is that, yeah, it's expensive to get in right now, too. We had expensive prices for breeding stock and expensive prices for land. So, it'll all come in time.
All right. Well, thanks for taking the time, Kathy.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Calvin.